Gumption, defined as initiative, aggressiveness, resourcefulness, courage, spunk, guts, common sense, and shrewdness. Welcome to the podcast. This is Stories of Gumption with your host, Ryan Lee. Alrighty, here we are, everybody. Another episode of the Stories of Gumption podcast. We're at number 15. Number 15 already. Thank you to everybody who's stuck around from episode 1 or early on. If this is your first time ever listening, I hope you enjoy. We have a really good one today. Should be a lot of fun. Should be enlightening, and we should have a really good time. What are we talking about here? Stories of Gumption, conversations with entrepreneurs, creative thinkers, and in my opinion, really, really impressive people. We have sponsors to talk about real quick. Open Gate Farmstead. Open Gate Farmstead is a first-generation farm specializing in free-range poultry, pasture-raised pork, and seasonal produce. The farm is run using a simple principle. Happy animals make the healthiest and tastiest product. So check them out on YouTube, on Facebook or Instagram. And for Gumption listeners, they are taking $1 off your first order of eggs. So I love what they're doing with the local farm-to-table movement. They're doing a lot of good things. Check them out. We also have sponsorship from Kavanaugh Realty. They're a local independent real estate company helping their neighbors buy and sell their homes. Check them out on the web and social media. #LocalMatters. We also have a featured sponsor for this episode, Spark-A-Clean. They provide professional and economic cleaning solutions to residential and commercial structures. They specialize in window cleaning, floor care, carpet extraction, and auto and boat detailing. Give them a call for a free estimate at 518-578-2931 or find them on Facebook, Instagram at Spark-A-Clean, SPARKIKLEEN. That's Zach and Kate Hoyt. I've met them through the Adirondack Young Professionals, actually. Phenomenal people. They're doing great things. They really care about this community. And if you have a cleaning service need, give them a call. 518-578-2931. All right. So, today, I am with a very gumptious individual. I feel privileged to be able to have this conversation and share it with you all today. You sort of put together your list of people that you totally want to talk to ahead of time, and this fine woman is one of them. She is a past Clinton County legislator for the Area 7. She is a past treasurer of the Clinton County government. She's a former New York State Assemblywoman for the 114th and 115th District, and she's an advocate for all citizens in the North Country. I am pleased to welcome to the podcast, Janet Duprey.
Good morning. Thank you.
Janet, thank you so much for volunteering your time. I know you're super busy now that you're out of the assembly. It seems like when you volunteer, you're always super busy. I know that with a lot of volunteers in scouting, they volunteer and then they get more busy. Would you say you're more or less busy than you were?
I will never be as busy as I was during my 10 years in the assembly. 7 days a week, I think an average of at least 60 hours a week, and there's no way. I enjoy my volunteering. I do what I want to do. Been pleased to be asked for many events, but never will I meet that standard again.
That must be just a whole nother level of busy.
It was, and after I retired, as people said to me that, and most people come up to me and say, "Hey, you look pretty good. You really look good." And I thought, I didn't realize I was stressed until I wasn't. And I think that you just kind of get used to doing what you're doing and living to the level you're doing. But it is very nice right now. I have most of my weekends off. I mean, occasionally I agree to do something, but it had been years since I can say that I didn't have something on weekends. People, even when I was in county government, there were often things going on politically where people expected me to show up. And certainly in the assembly, I don't know that there were many weekends, if any, that somebody didn't have something and they'd like to have the Assemblywoman there, and I love to be there. I'm not complaining about it, but you do it and you just don't think about it because it's fun. But once it was done, I realized I was exhausted.
Like, holy smokes, I have a Saturday to myself.
Yeah.
I can play it. Yeah, you have to get some more hobbies, I suppose, right?
The big thing, Ryan, was I could watch Sunday afternoon football.
Yes.
I'm a huge football fan, and that would be the only time I would get resentful, is that I would be saying I could be home watching football and I'm driving to Tupper Lake or wherever. So
now I have to ask the question now, what is your favorite football team?
I'm a long-standing, suffering Jets fan.
Okay.
I lived in a subway station away from the Jets when they opened at Shea Stadium.
Oh, wow.
And so I've stayed loyal. I also am a Patriots fan because I like to also root for somebody who wins. Sure.
Yeah, and they certainly win.
Yes.
And, Tom Brady, controversial player. You either love him or you hate him.
Yep.
But he's a phenomenal quarterback.
I admire his stick-to-itiveness and his ability at his age, and I guess that's part of it. It's in the last few years I've become really a supporter of the Patriots, and my family are Giants fans. So,
and he kind of changed the script a little bit, because when he showed up, he was not a all-star draft pick. He was, I forget his number. I don't know sports statistics very well, but I know he wasn't drafted very high, and I know when he ran the 40-meter dash, he was really slow. There were people in Beekmantown playing football, including myself, that were running as fast as Tom Brady, but he's got all those other skills that are just,
Yes.
Anyhow, I digress early. So, so you said you grew up around Shea Stadium?
No, I spent a year there.
You spent a
but
year
it
there.
happened to be the year that the Jets started there. So.
Okay, so bring me back a little bit. So tell me about your childhood and what you like to do and what you did for fun and where you grew up, all that kind of fun stuff.
I grew up in Peru.
Okay.
A lifelong Peru resident for most parts. I went away for a couple of years, but my dad was an IBEW electrician. Ran his own business for a while. My parents actually moved here. They both interestingly grew up here. Did not know each other. My dad grew up in Keysville. My mom grew up in Peru. They met in New York City.
Oh, wow.
Again, as really when their romance blossomed, and they moved up here 1945 and settled in and never even took a thought about moving away again. So, again, my dad, IBW, worked major construction.
Wow.
Built, like the World Trade Center and the Legislative Office Building in Albany, the prisons and the schools and that sort of thing. The consequence of that was he died of mesothelioma caused by asbestos.
Oh, wow.
Be 25 years in June.
Oh, wow.
My mom was a member of the Calkins family, the Calkins farm.
Mm-hmm.
She was a nutritionist by profession and a stay-at-home mom, as most moms were during that time, and worked part-time at the Peru school. But it was a very satisfying upbringing. It was comfortable. It was certainly a loving family. And when I was about 10-ish in that area was when Plattsburgh Air Force Base showed up.
Oh, wow.
Scene. So our little community that our house is on, and it continues to be, not where I live anymore, but where I grew up, it was on Main Street in Peru. And everything around us was, across the road was all woods. And I remember when they started cutting down all the trees and putting up all these houses, and everybody started moving in. I mean, it certainly changed the, and for the better. I'm not, certainly a lot of folks moved in. We had more diversity. We had the opportunity to have a lot more friends.
Yeah.
And that was the era that I grew up in Peru, graduated from the Peru school, and it was good. It was my favorite memories of being a child were at our camp in Willsboro. They're still my favorite memories. They're still my favorite place to sit on the lake and
that's awesome.
And enjoy the water. And we now have 6 generations there at that camp.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
It is incredible. And we are so blessed and so fortunate. And so, but we had some great family times there.
Yeah. I find some of the most therapeutic moments in my life are when I can go out on a camp or just relax, and it's like unplug everything and just let it be the natural ambiance around you.
I loved it as a child, and I will say to you that it was just last summer, so 2 years after I retired, that I spent 6 weeks there after doing generally about 5 or 6 days a year.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that 6 weeks that made me realize that retirement's a good thing. That's what I waited all my adult life for, and I'm not going back.
Yeah. No, well, congratulations. And we certainly benefited from your time prior to your retirement, I would say. So I asked this question to everybody on the podcast, or mostly everybody. What would you say your definition of gumption is?
I would look at gumption as saying that you have a sense of determining what's right and wrong. It's not always black and white, but that you have the courage to stand up for what you believe in, and you stick with it, and you don't back down.
Yeah. That, I assume, I don't know, but I assume is something that a lot of politicians in general struggle with. Seems like there's a lot of pressure to, you want to do the right thing, but there's a lot of other pressures.
You're absolutely right.
Tell me more about that experience. I mean, for a little bit. I mean, from your perspective.
Well, I think that I could give a couple of examples. Certainly one being the same-sex marriage. That's probably the most visible one.
Mm-hmm.
And when I ran for office for the Assembly in 2006, I said I was not in support of same-sex marriage. I supported civil unions.
Mm-hmm.
Not long after I got into the Assembly, I was approached by a young man by the name of Jeff Cook, who was the head of the Log Cabin Republicans. Came in and started talking to me about, and it evolved into being called marriage equality, but whatever we want to call it, it was the same thing, the rights of people to marry the person they love.
Yep.
And Jeff and I had some great discussions, told him, my concerns, and he was very respectful. He kept coming back respectfully and brought in a lot of reading material for me about the 1,100 legal rights that civil unions did not provide for people. And as he gave me that, and I said to him, I'm going to read it, the bill came up for a vote.
Mm-hmm.
I will say forever that Teresa Sayward, my colleague and friend, and we've been friends since we were teenagers in Willsboro, she probably gave the best speech I have ever heard on the floor of the State Assembly when she spoke in favor of that bill. She talked a lot about her oldest son who is gay. And I had a hard time voting no on that. I truly had a hard time voting no. And I did because I felt I could come home and explain to my constituents a no vote, but better than I could a yes vote, partly because of what I had said during the campaign, but mostly because I really wasn't there yet. Came home and started meeting with constituents, called some of my friends, those who I knew might be for it, those who I knew were for it, members of the gay and lesbian community, including some relatives. I spoke with clergy. Called people randomly.
Yeah.
That were friends of mine, people's school superintendents and various people that I just picked up the phone and said, I want your opinion on this.
Yeah.
My husband and I were getting ready to go on a trip for our 40th wedding anniversary. So it was September 9th, probably, on or about in 2007.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was packing, I just stood there for a minute and thought, what right do I have? What possible right do I have for my husband and I to go out and celebrate 40 years of a happy marriage and deny other people the right to get married?
That's an amazing story.
And I called Teresa first, Jeff Cook second, and then another one of the members of the Assembly third, and said, you have my vote. I'm going forward. It's the right thing to do. Of course, I got a tremendous amount from the Republican conference that I would never win again. That would be I'd be a one and done term. I said, didn't matter. It just didn't matter. There's a point where when you know you're doing the right thing, you just do it. And I've never looked back, and I am incredibly proud that I was on the right side of history on that.
That's gumption. I mean, you think about all the pressures that be, and like, I think when you grow up in an environment taught about life in a certain way, it can put these barriers in tunnel vision in the way you see the world, and it takes gumption to look beyond that. And that sounds like that's what you had to do in that moment.
In the other that was pretty similar, was the Reproductive Health Act.
Okay. Where, tell me more about that one too.
Well, again, I've been a supporter of women's rights since the 1960s. I grew up in that era of abortion being illegal and the back alley abortions, and I've had people say to me, "Oh, that's all just made up." It's not just made up. During the time I was living in New York City, I had a friend who bled out from a botched abortion.
Yeah.
That makes you pretty committed to the cause.
Yeah.
I've often said, I continue to say, because I'm pro-choice doesn't mean I'm pro-abortion. It just means that I don't believe another woman's health and her decisions are any of my business. And I feel very strongly that way. It should be between the woman and her physician or her healthcare provider. There are reasons. And to see what's happening today really upsets me. I mean, I have met with young women who at 14 and 15 had abortions because of incest. Raped by a brother or an uncle or a father, and tell me that those children should have to carry a baby just really, really offends me. So I think it has to be for good cause. I think that, but I think that's a decision that people have to make. And I stood up and spoke on the floor of the Assembly. I think at that time when it really got heated up, I believe Teresa had already retired, as had a couple of other pro-choice Republicans. My last 4 years there, I was the only one who would speak out for it. I did it. I spoke passionately because it's something I passionately believe in. Cost me 3 primaries. I had 3 primary opponents who came after me because of those two. It was a combination of the fact that I dared to support LGBTQ rights and a woman's right to take care of her own body. That I was primaried. They painted my lawn signs "baby killer."
Wow.
I actually, with the state police and the city police, they convinced me to put full security into the office. I said, somebody should be able to just walk in and talk to the assembly person.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have to come through all this. And one of the BCI persons said to me, what will be even more offensive is if he was an honorary pallbearer at my funeral. Got my attention.
Yeah.
So we have the security there. It's still there for the Assemblyman now. But I thought in Plattsburgh, we just shouldn't be at that point. Subsequently, just a short time later, my husband and I put full security in my house because of the threats.
Yeah.
The death threats. And it was a tough time. It was a really tough time. But again, if you don't stand up for what you believe in, how do you look at yourself in the mirror? And how do I say to my daughter and my granddaughters, I'm here to protect you if I'm not. So
yeah,
I've never wavered, and I never will.
I think I think that's what impresses me most about you, Janet. I mean, like, every time your name comes up in a conversation with friends, family, whoever, it's like, now that's a politician who stood by her guns. And like, people respect that. I think from my circle, sounds like you've had plenty of threats along the way too. But in modern politics, as a Republican, to be so, I mean, not to make the whole podcast episode very political, but that's real life conversation that we need to talk about. And I feel like,
well, it was interesting, Ryan, because when the first time I stood up and really spoke on a woman's right to choose, the Republican conference came at me bad, really heavy. first of all, again, they thought I was going to lose the election.
Mm-hmm.
But more than that, they wanted me to rescind and just stop.
Wow.
To be very honest, the Democrats opened their doors and said, if you want to come into our conference, you're welcome. The Republican Party was good to me over the years. They took me in at 1975 when there had never been a woman running, and I started that way, and I had great support through the Republican Party. Many of those people have now left the Republican Party, but I just felt I did not want to walk away from the party. I think if we don't stand within the Republican Party and say that as Republicans, we can still support the correct social issues and defend them and be supportive of health care and again, women's rights and people's rights to live their own lives. I think that government gets too intrusive. It shouldn't be up to politicians to say what people should do with their own bodies, as long as they're not doing something illegal or committing a murder or some sort of a crime. And they're turning this into crimes, and it just is so offensive to me. And yet I will always be a Republican, because I think that if we don't stand up and have that branch of the Republican Party, we fail somewhere along the way. I'm a member of the National Republican Advisory Board for Planned Parenthood, and I recently joined the state Planned Parenthood board as the token Republican. I kind of kid them about that, but
yeah.
I think that it shouldn't be because of politics. It should be because of what's right.
Yes. And by you staying true to that decision as well, to remain a Republican, that helps balance out the polarizing, what we've seen now, that like if you believe in certain issues that you have to be in one party or the other, you can stand true to your whole party core beliefs and have social opinion and beliefs that are differ, right? I mean,
fiscally, I was always a conservative and still am.
Yeah.
So I think there is that balance of I get upset with some of the bills I see coming out of Albany now, because I think that they're certainly not in what I would be in line with. But it's it's more than politics. It's about doing what your beliefs are.
So you started as a legislator.
I did.
Tell me about that part of your life where you decided, I'm going to get into politics.
It wasn't quite like that. It was 1975. We were about to have my son's 7th birthday. My daughter was, about 4 months old. And a gentleman from the pro-Republican Party came to our house and asked my husband to run. And he immediately laughed and said, "She's the politician, ask her." To which this guy replied, "Oh, no, a woman couldn't do this job. There's never been a woman.
You're kidding me. Wow.
There really shouldn't be a woman. A woman can't possibly get elected. Maybe someday, but not now. No way." So you got to know, my personality. By the time he left, I was running.
Yeah, right.
I can't pretend it was altruistic. I wasn't out to save the world. I was out to prove that a woman could run. I was running against a guy I had started kindergarten with.
Oh, wow.
I didn't think I was going to win. I truly didn't. But I was going to prove that a woman could go out there and run. And obviously, I did win. As an interesting side note, my son-in-law now, Robbie Timmons, it was just shy of 3 days, 40 years to the day that he took the oath of office for the same position.
No kidding.
So incredibly proud of him. And that little 4-month-old baby was holding the Bible for him with their teenage daughters there. So it was a very emotional night for me. I think probably even more than it was for them. But
oh, wow.
Yeah, and then the first night I walked in and got sworn in, and I thought of it that night as he was being sworn in. One of my colleagues came over to me and said, "You may think we're going to congratulate you. We don't want you here. You don't belong here, and we'll get rid of you in 2 years." Oh, so that was my introduction to politics.
Pleasantries all around.
Just, really felt loved. I want to make it clear. And again, I think that's where I became bipartisan. I've received a lot of credit for being bipartisan. I'm proud of it. But there were Democrats on that first board who mentored me, who were gentlemen, who were very nice to me. There were Republicans who did, and there were Democrats who were mean, and there were Republicans who were mean. So I quickly realized that I'm in a different spot here. It's the 9 guys and me, and I can't just be political, nor do I want to be. It had never occurred to me to be just political, but that I'm going to foster relationships and know how to work this for what's right for the people that I'm here representing, and I couldn't do it without support on both sides.
Any interesting stories from that time that you can share?
Yeah, we did a lot of good things, I think, and it was good 10 years. At the end of 10 years, I was ready to move on to the county treasurer's office.
Wow,
but, at that time, there were no computers. In fact, we started, the government center was under construction.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was an interesting, I've seen a lot.
This is my own naivety and, in some ways, privilege of growing up in the age of the computer. But how does one manage a full county treasury, so to speak, without a computer?
It was, when I walked into the treasurer's office in 1986, it was just calculators and pencils, and calculating out tax rates to the 9th or 10th decimal point. They were all very, very good at it because they had been doing it, but the computers were just coming in to really vogue, and I insisted that the staff members all go with me to Clinton Community College to learn how to work these crazy machines. There were probably a lot of bad words thrown around.
Yeah.
Everybody went kicking and screaming, but it was slower, it was harder to do. It was until you got into it and knew how to do it, and so it certainly changed the whole tenor of what we could do. And we were able to put in the first integrated accounting system so that, in fact, departments could talk to each other without talking. It was, we actually could find out what the numbers were in every department and who was spending what and how. And
wow.
And it was a pretty interesting time, and it gave us the ability for the first time to start installment payment of taxes. Absolutely no way it could have been done with the hand-held pencils and calculators. We were able to do that, and that had been a dream of mine for years because of the way so many people struggle to pay that tax bill. And by doing it in 3 installments for school, 4 installments for land, it was such a relief to so many people. That's probably the one thing in the treasurer's office that I received the most thanks for, and sometimes still do.
Just hang your hat on that.
Yeah.
Wow. And then at some point, you decide, I want to move on from that gig. And
that wasn't exactly right either.
Okay, so who said you couldn't do it?
I was absolutely contented. I'd already talked to my staff about it because I had been elected, I think, that year. And that would be my last term, and I was just going to fade off into retirement from the treasurer's office. I loved that job. I mean, I look at myself right now and say I was so incredibly fortunate. I had 3 political positions over 41 years, and I enjoyed every day I went to work.
That's awesome.
And boy, not everybody is that blessed and that lucky. So I said, I just kind of a heads up. We're going to get everything we want to get done. We'll do it. We're going to have a good time. And we had a great time in the treasurer's office. We had fun. We got a lot of work done, but we took time to have fun. We were at an event, and I remember it was at the Elks Club. I can't tell you what it was. I don't recall. It had to be some sort of a Republican something.
Sure. And
a small group of folks were at a table, and they called me over and said the incumbent assembly member had to go.
Yep.
It was Ortloff.
Yep.
So that he wasn't fulfilling his job and that he wasn't serving the constituents the way he had been there 20 years.
Yep. I remember that. And
we had to find somebody. So I said, I agree. I think we've got to. So,
like looking over your shoulder, like,
yeah,
who are you
no,
talking to?
I started looking. I started looking for somebody.
Yeah, you're looking for somebody else, and they're like looking at you. It's like,
so we agreed we would come back and meet again in a week or two, and we did, and I we were just kind of sitting there chit-chatting, and I said, and I had looked up his record and said, no, he absolutely wasn't. He was missing an astronomical number of votes in Albany, and just there were a lot of things that whether it was complacency, I don't know, and I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, but it was time.
Yep.
So I said to them, I'd talked to 2 or 3 people, couldn't get anybody, and they all just burst out laughing and said, come on. Are you serious? You don't know it's going to be you? And that's when I looked over my back and said, who's in back of me here? It truly had not occurred to me.
Wow.
So, yeah, I think now that was a little naive. But I
then what?
Then I said, well, whoa, wait a minute. I kind of like where I am.
Yeah.
I kind of like what I'm doing. I'm pretty comfortable.
Yeah.
But I did agree that I would go home and talk it over with Elmer, my husband, and my kids. And the overwhelming thought was, try and do it. We were going to face a primary. It's not easy to take out an incumbent in a primary. Again, I didn't think I could do that. Felt that he might beat me, but my hope at that point was that then he'd go back to being really committed to the position.
You would be the catalyst that gets him doing his...
that do the job. Do it right. Job. Because this is not about a personal thing. It's about getting the job done right.
Yep.
And so when I announced and we kind of started, I think it was a shock. I mean, we had kept it very quiet until I had an announcement at what's now Best Western, and we went full bore. We had over 100 people there that day, some great speakers, and really kicked it off with a look out world kind of attitude. And and I got a lot of pushback from some very important political folks who told me I could not, should not, would not.
I haven't heard that theme yet in this podcast.
Yes.
Wow.
And again, my grandmother was born in Ireland on St. Patrick's Day. She lived for 98 years. People think that the genetics came directly from her to me. When I decide I'm going to do something, I don't care who it is. From the governor on down, I'm going to go. Yeah, I'm going to do it.
Yep.
And that's when the governor gave the incumbent assemblyman the position on the parole board.
Yep.
To avoid and they said to me, we don't want a primary. I said, well, guess what? I'm in it. I'm all in.
Yeah.
And by then, and it was interesting. I raised a lot of money in a hurry. I was surprised at some of the folks who were ecstatic to think that I was doing it. I really had not anticipated that. And, so we moved forward, and it was a great 10 years. It was a great ride in Albany. I was exhausted. It was very busy, but given some of the things I've been able to do and that I have done, and the number of people that I was able to help, it was wonderful. Yeah. It was an absolutely wonderful time frame. And my family talked me in. My family helped to talk me into going. My family convinced me that it was time to retire. So
yeah.
Kind of a nice wrap.
And then 6 weeks at the camp.
And 6 weeks.
Tell me about like a typical day for you when you were in that role. Like, I know every day was different, but is there an answer to that question? Like a general, paint a picture for the listeners of what it was like?
A typical day never seemed to happen because somewhere halfway through something would blow up.
Yep.
And we'd move on to something totally unexpected. But it would all depend whether I was in Albany or here. Mm-hmm. First of all, we've January to June in Albany, a lot of the time, 3 to 4 days a week. Back here from July through the end of the year.
Yep.
Which was my favorite part.
Yep.
I never really enjoyed Albany. I mean, it was the necessary evil. We did the budget. We did a lot of things. That the time in Albany, and I think it's improved somewhat, but at that time, it was nothing for us to stay in session till 9, 10 o'clock every night, doing bills that had been laying around for years.
Wow.
Just, to me, wasting time. I mean, we did it for the same bills for the 10 years I was there. I found it infuriating.
Wow.
everybody served on committees. I was very involved in the committees I was on. I meet with a lot of constituents down there, which was fun. And I, because of my involvement in the autism world, and my commitment to that, I would have people come from across the state to talk to me about it. And certainly as I got into some of these most controversial issues, I had folks popping up from everywhere to tell me I was either right or wrong.
More pleasantries.
Back here in the North Country, it was different. It was more hands-on with people. And it also was, while I was in Albany too, those days that the Thursday, Friday that I was home, we had meetings lined up pretty much in the office, or a school tour or a business tour, or, the opportunities I had to get inside of just about every major business in the North Country and get to know the people who worked there and walk through them and find out what they were doing. And I certainly, 19 school districts. Interesting.
That's fun.
I will tell you, when I first started, one of the guys from Long Island said to me, you have to go to your school district every week and get a picture taken with the kids. And I said, which of the 19 would you like me to choose? And he really couldn't get it. He was like, what?
Yeah.
But yeah, those were just the fun things, to walk into the classrooms and sit and talk to the kids. And I'm a kind of an impromptu person. So we'd be walking down the hall and I'd say to the superintendent or the principal, whoever I was with, can I just pop into this room? And of course they always let me, and teachers were always glad to see me, but it was those sorts of things, and meeting with the different kinds of whether it was scouting or, all different, and going to these sorts of events and meeting with children and speaking with them. One of the things that I've been able to carry over that I'm so grateful for is speaking at some of the schools, some of our middle schools and high schools, and Plattsburgh State and Clinton Community College. And those I soak it up, because I think we have a great generation coming up. And the Q&A, I'll give a very short kind of intro about my life, but the Q&As are just great, and to get them engaged and talk about it, it's fun. So, and again, a lot of nights I would be on the road, which is the reason my family got me to retire, to be honest, because of my glaucoma.
Yeah.
I would go to events. It was a 3,500 square mile district.
Oh, yeah.
And put a lot of miles on my car.
Wow.
But it was fun. It was just a wonderful experience that I am honored and feel blessed to have had. And no, I wouldn't go back into it. I guess I would. I would like to have started it a little younger.
Oh, really? You so of the 3 jobs, Assemblywoman was your favorite?
It was the most satisfying. Again, we did some good things in the legislature. I think that I left my footprint there for no other reason than I was a woman.
Yeah.
I know I did some good things in the treasurer's office to get the programs up and running and to make it a top-notch office with great staff. But the assembly position of being able to affect people's lives.
Yeah.
Whether it was getting health insurance for a child with cancer.
Yeah.
Assisting someone who, 85 years old, didn't have any fuel in their house. These sorts of things, a state trooper or correction officer who had been disabled on the job, and the system in the state was so outrageously slow that 2 years later they were still on the brink of losing a home. And I had one CEO call me and say, I can't buy a dress for my daughter for the prom. Being able to get those things expedited, they will always be memories for me that you can't duplicate, and you just feel so good doing them. And that's where I go back to that group of people who said to me, we got to serve the constituents. We've got to work with people. And I had the chance to do that, and I had great staff. I had marvelous staff. But I would usually make the initial phone call to an agency.
Yep.
Even if it was somebody trying to get a liquor license.
Yep.
I'd make the initial call and talk to them about it, and then say my staff will follow up with my staff. And I always made a point of calling back and thanking them. And it seems like such a simple thing.
Yep.
I can't tell you the number of staff people who said to me, Assemblywoman, you're the only person who's thanked us.
Get out of here. Really?
Isn't
Wow.
that outrageous?
That's crazy.
Or the number of staff people who said to me, are you really the Assemblywoman?
What? Wow.
Because it's easy to pass it off. It's just not my
Yeah.
personality. And I'm not saying that as any kind of it's just who I am.
Yeah.
That's what I love to do. It's not because I did it for anybody to say, oh, wow, look at what she's doing. I just liked doing it. And I wanted maybe I'm a control freak. I think
Yeah.
I've kind of, as I've reassessed it, as I look back,
Yeah.
I think I could have let go of a lot of that stuff and I just didn't want to because it's what I liked.
But that's also how you made a unique impact that kept you energized to keep doing it. You know, if you didn't wholeheartedly go in the way you needed to do it for you, I mean, you might have lost steam, right?
Yeah. Oh, I think so. And, you know, there were a lot of sleepless nights. I guess none more than the June of 2015 when we went through the 3-week escape.
Yeah, tell me about that. Oh, man. I can't even imagine what was going through your team's head and your own head. Oh, my gosh.
It was the most difficult time I had through my 41-year career. But it wasn't, my part of it was not difficult compared to what the correction officers and administration and the state police and all of those, and the people who were part of living in that area went through. I got the phone call at a little 6:30 that Saturday morning that 2 inmates were missing. They thought they might still be in the facility. But let me back up and say I had a great rapport with all of the prison systems.
Yeah.
Including the administration. I worked very closely with all of them. I met with the commissioner of corrections. He actually asked and came up to my retirement party to give a speech at his request.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I still am in contact with them from time to time, not like I used to be, and I toured the prisons a lot. Not because it was necessarily the most fun thing I could do, but because they're such a vital part of our economy and the safety and security of the North Country. So when this happened, it was certainly incredibly difficult. I waited until later in the afternoon that first day to go up, partly because I guess I'll be absolutely honest about it. I didn't want to be there when the governor was there. He and I get along. I'm not, but I didn't want to be a part of a political thing.
Yeah.
I wanted to go up and meet with the correction officers.
Yeah.
To tell them I got your back. I'm here. We'll do what we need to do going forward.
Yep.
Certainly wanted to meet with Superintendent Reset. And I knew the commissioner and his top staff were there. Again, that's just who I was. I never cared if I got in front of a camera as much as I enjoyed the back door stuff. So I went up that afternoon and met with them.
It's gumption.
Well, it's caring.
Yeah.
I guess I would look at it more as it's caring. The weeks that and then of course I had to go back to Albany and I said many times that my body was in Albany. My heart was in the North Country, particularly in the Dannemora region and then over into Franklin County as things moved. Major Chuck Guest and I were friends when it started. We certainly became much better friends after. We continue to be in touch with each other. It was a tough, again, it's so tough for everybody. I will always feel that Steve Reset was treated very, very poorly. I had a great rapport with Superintendent Mike Kirkpatrick, who succeeded him, and he's in Albany now, and he and I still go back and forth with each other. But I think that the mistakes that got made were made at the administrative level in Albany, and I've had that discussion with the commissioner. Yeah. Before and after he gave my speech, gave the speech for me. Yeah. But and I guess one of my most interesting stories, and I actually spoke about it at Major Guess's retirement party, that I was in the break room in Albany, and several of my colleagues from the city were there, and they were all chit-chatting about what a waste of tax dollars on this escape and all this money that was being spent, and those guys are long gone. They're in Mexico. They're in Canada. They're not there. Nobody knows what they're doing. And for the first time in the years I had been there, I absolutely lost it. And I think I was a little loud, and I said to them, if you're all so smart, get in your cars and drive about 160 miles north and tell Major Guest what he's doing wrong, because I'm sure he would love your input.
Yeah. Whew.
And I dropped my salad in the garbage, walked out of the room, and to their credit, just about all of them came and apologized to me later in the day.
Yeah.
But then, fast forward to March of 2016, and I had what is the best honor I ever had in Albany. I one week had all of the CERT team leaders, that's the Corrections Emergency Response Team,
Yep.
the guys who were out there in the swamps from across the state. I had all of the leaders from across the state and the superintendents of the prisons. I honored them individually in the chambers. And the following week, I honored now retired Major Chuck Guest and now retired Sergeant Jay Cook. It was for the applause and the reception they got was phenomenal. And that is just absolutely the greatest honor I had in 10 years down there.
Did you happen, I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, but did you happen to watch that Showtime special on it? Because
no.
I was so nervous when I heard they were doing that, because I was like, boy, they're going to dramatize this thing up into something that it doesn't need to be. But I was just curious.
No. And I refused to participate with it. They asked me.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. And it's because it would take away from the real stories, right?
It was mainly because of my support for the correction officers.
Mm.
And I felt that they would not portray the correction officers appropriately.
Mm. And I think that's fair.
And that and they are their jobs, if people haven't walked those blocks and done it more than once. I mean, I've seen correction officers who were thrown on with feces and all sorts of animals.
Wow.
And I was there enough, and I walked it in real life. And I admire what they do. It's a very dangerous job. And they are committed, and they are decent people, and they work hard, and they're always on the edge, because you just never know when something is going to go wrong.
Exactly.
And when we talk about volunteers, I mean, there are EMS and fire department guys and Little League guys and gals and Little League and Scout leaders, and they're just a tremendous group, and people, the general public has no way of knowing and understanding. I didn't know and understand what goes on. And the first time I went to Clinton Correctional, I walked out, and a former superintendent, actually my cousin Pete Lacey, was with me. And he's the one who said to me, "You have to go." And I said, "Well, all right, if you go with me."
Yep.
And we did. And we walked out, and I said to him, "Oh, good. I'm glad I don't have to do that again." And he said, "Of course you do. You need to keep coming back and coming back and coming back, because they need you." And I just looked at him and thought, "Oh my God, I got to do this again."
Yeah.
and now it's, I look forward to going back. So it's, but I just felt that they were just not going to be represented appropriately.
I think that's another example of gumption, standing true to what you believe in. It's a recurring theme in this episode, and I really like that a lot. So you're retired now. I want to learn a little bit more what you got cooking now. I know you said you're not nearly as busy as you were, but what kind of things do you do for fun? What kind of things are you volunteering for? What are you passionate about these days?
Well, I guess my two main passions, I'm still on a few boards. I've not many, but a few. But the two things that I am the most passionate about are honor flight. Great. It's when Sheriff Rick Cutting retired from Essex County. He asked me to take the position of Director of Operations. I had gone to all the honor flights except for two when we were in session all night long and I couldn't get here. So I'd always been there, and I'd always been a part of it. This is much different. It's great. It's an opportunity to really meet with the veterans, to interact with them, to be a part of a program that, again, we talk about satisfaction, personal satisfaction, to be able to do it. I've always said my job is to hug every veteran.
Mm-hmm.
So I have just escalate that now. I get to do it more often.
Yeah.
And it doesn't get any better than that. It really doesn't. My other passion right now is the medical aid in dying legislation. It first came up in 2015. It didn't get out of the health committee at the time. And in 2016, at the last meeting of the health committee, which I had then become a member of,
Mm-hmm.
I spoke very impromptu, didn't expect to. I was fading away into the great depth of retirement.
Riding off into the sunset. Yeah.
And I started to speak about it, and it's the only time that the bill has come out of the health committee, was after my speech. But,
Wow.
I've gone down several times. I've been down 3 times this year. I will go again, trying to get this legislation passed. I don't understand the reluctance of passing it, and I tell my personal story. I mentioned earlier my dad died of mesothelioma.
Mm-hmm.
We had hospice. They were wonderful, but they could not control the pain,
Mm-hmm.
and it was awful at the end. Nobody should have to die that way.
Yep.
My mother made the decision to remove her feeding tube.
Mm-hmm.
She said to me, I never wanted, excuse me, she said, I never wanted to be an old lady with the drool running out of my mouth and look at me. She couldn't swallow anymore. She made that decision. She had the feeding tube removed, and it took her 11 days to starve to death.
Wow.
She died of that and dehydration. I guess is really the main thing that causes the death. But I sat with her 24/7. Pretty much ran out to take a shower when somebody else would come in,
That's crazy. That's crazy.
It was horrible. It was horrible, and we had some really intense discussions. Actually talked about the history of the family, some things I didn't know, because we had lots of time. She was still completely, till she died, absolutely lucid. She should have had the opportunity to make a decision. And when she made that decision to take out her feeding tube, she should have had the right to have medication that would allow her to die peacefully.
Mm.
At one point, she said to me, when we've had to put your dogs down, you treated them better than I'm being treated.
When you put it that way, that's like the simplest way to
Yep.
describe what
Yep.
the problem is.
About halfway through it, we called it our death watch. I mean, if you don't have a sense of humor sometimes during these
Yeah.
times, you don't ever have anything. But she said to me, are you going to do a eulogy? And I said, gee, I don't know. I hadn't even thought about it. You wouldn't let me do one for Dad. And she still had a twinkle in her eye. She couldn't smile anymore, but she had a twinkle in her eye. And she said, yeah, but you know what? I don't have to listen to this one. Is that priceless? I guess I did a eulogy.
Yeah.
But
she had a good sense of
She
humor.
had a great
at
sense
least.
of humor, and again, right up to the end. And when she finally died, my daughter Michelle and I were holding her hands. My son John and our husbands were there, and it was peaceful at the end, thankfully. But she had been afraid that she was going to choke to death, that different things were going to happen, and I thought she shouldn't have had to have had those worries for those 11 days. And so I'm committed. I think it's about choice.
Yeah.
Somebody who doesn't want to do it doesn't have to do it.
Right.
There are so many safeguards in this bill. In fact, we're now getting pushed from some other people who are saying it's too strict. So just let us, if we could get this through, and then if there are amendments down the road, maybe. But right now, we are, and people, and some of the people in the disability generation or population are opposed. I said, I have a grandson who's on the spectrum. If I thought that he could be misled on this, I would never be supporting this bill.
Yeah.
It takes 2 physicians. It's a very, very stringent. It's based very much on the Oregon death with dying bill, which has been in effect for 20 years without any repercussions. So, I'm hoping. We just keep hoping that. And the governor this year finally came out in support of it. So, would love to see it done by the end of June. I don't know.
Is there anything that listeners of this podcast can do?
Reach out to their legislators. reach out to the Assemblyman Jones and Senator Little and any other legislators, to the governor. I mean, he said he would support it, but he hasn't come out strongly.
Give a little poke.
Give a little poke.
Yeah.
Email, phone calls, leave a message. It's anybody who supports this. And about 70% of the people, regardless of politics, regardless of religion, regardless of where they live in the state, are supporting this legislation. I just don't get why we can't get it through.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And
Yeah.
you certainly, I feel like I've gotten a good dose of gumption today, listening to the whole, all the different stories you have. I'd like to pivot now
Okay.
towards the rapid fire section
Okay.
of the Stories of Gumption podcast here. Are you ready?
Yep.
I'm coming at you fast. Or
Okay.
Sort of fast.
Remember my age. I'm only just so quick.
Right. Okay. Question number 1. What's a book that you would gift to a friend, and why would you gift that book?
The Greatest Generation. Because I think it's the Tom Brokaw book about World War II. And I think that our younger generations, and you didn't recognize the name, so I'll include you in the younger generation group, don't understand what these young soldiers at the age of 17, 18, 19 years old, when they were picked off from their local communities and their families and went overseas to a place they had never certainly seen, and some of them probably never heard of, to fight a war. And they could write letters that you might or might not ever get a response because they never knew where they were going to be and what they went through during that era. I think that it should be required reading in every school.
I like that. I wrote it down. Greatest Generation by
Yep.
Tom Brokaw.
Yep.
And certainly the generation that was involved here back home,
Yes.
helping the country become so successful while half of the population was gone, essentially, right?
Had they not done what they did, we would not be living with the freedoms and the rights that we have, period.
Yeah. So, okay. I love that. I love that book, and I'm going to pick it up, actually.
Yeah, please do.
If you could have, this is a fun question. Question number 2. If you could have a billboard anywhere, what would you put on the billboard?
I would put on the billboard a lot of what I put on my campaign material.
Oh, which would say?
Be ethical, accountable, dedicated, compassionate.
I love it. With all the nonsense and disagreement and just hate that we have in our world right now, that might be one of the best billboards that we need to. How do you and I get this billboard for real and start just putting it around the country? Because I feel like that would be helpful.
I think so too, and every day I think it more.
Yeah.
I think we really have got to get back to a world of sanity and compassion, and stop the bullying and the lies, and it's so discouraging.
Yep, I agree.
Hard to be a Republican some days.
But the gumption of staying true, I respect that a lot. Okay, question number 3. What advice would you give to your 18-year-old self if you could go back and do so?
The same advice I have given to my 18-year-old grandchildren. And my youngest granddaughter is now 18, who, by the way, will cast her first vote for her dad this year. She's pretty excited.
Oh, that's awesome.
But, to listen.
Yes.
I think that in order to be successful, and it's something I had to learn to do, and I didn't learn it at 18. I hope I've learned it over the years to really listen to what other people have to say, because that's how you know what direction you should be heading in, and or how you can help them. To be open to change. I say to them at 18, you don't need to know what you want to do for the rest of your life. For God's sakes, I went to the assembly at 60. Don't wait that long. But don't be afraid to change, to have a different perspective, to say, hey, yeah, this isn't where I want to head, and be true to yourself.
I like that a lot. And we were talking before we clicked the record button on this podcast. One of the reasons I love doing this podcast is for that first reason you mentioned, listening.
Yeah.
That is such an important skill. And I've found by doing this podcast, I am becoming a better listener. I'm interrupting people less when I get excited about a topic. And that is now translating into my being better at my job, being better at my relationships and my friendships. And that, I hope, transcends into a happier, interaction with everybody I come across. So more people need to listen, practice listening.
Absolutely.
I like that a lot. This is my favorite question, the last question, my board of directors question. So if we could put together a board of directors to guide and mentor you through the rest of your life, who would those three people be? They could be dead, alive, famous or not, but who would the three people be that you would select to be on your board of directors?
Barbara Bush.
I like it.
Just got her book, actually, The Matriarch, this week, and I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, but I will be reading it, hopefully. Starting over the
and
weekend.
why? I'm curious why for each person, too.
Because she always spoke her mind. I mean, you want to talk about gumption, you want to talk about somebody who stood for what she believed in, whether or not her husband or anybody else believed it.
Mm-hmm.
She was one of the first women who I truly admired, who stood up and was pro-choice against what both President Bushes wanted. I think that she was very honest about her family and criticized them when she felt they should be criticized, but certainly supported them unconditionally. I kind of look at her as the country's grandmother.
Yeah.
She was just a special lady who had the opportunity to see her at the Republican convention.
Did you?
Yeah, the second term that G.W. Bush was
Wow.
was going into office, and I listened to her speak and met her briefly. I mean, certainly no long discussions, a shake of the hand, but
that's cool though.
It was absolutely cool. But I had admired her before, and I admired her even more after that. She's just a top-notch lady.
Wow.
Kevin Carroll.
Kevin Carroll
was the president and CEO of CVPH.
Ah.
When I first went on the board, and then I served 4 years as chair, and obviously he and I worked together very closely every day. We called him the tall guy.
The tall guy.
Actually, his administrative assistant dubbed him with that, and it stuck.
Nice.
Kevin was my mentor. It was the early 1980s, and I don't remember what years I served on the board. I just don't. But after that, a little bit. But I was on the board and an officer, but when I chaired it was late 80s. But Kevin showed me how to make better decisions and how to make timely decisions.
Yeah.
And his attitude was, if an issue comes up and you need to do it, you got to do it. You got to deal with it. And it's so much easier to procrastinate and hope it goes away. And I learned that that's not the way to do it.
Usually makes things worse.
Yep. And I learned leadership skills from Kevin. I watched him with the staff there. Certainly he had his administrative staff, but we would walk the halls of the hospital together, and he knew everybody by name. He would stop and ask them about their day. He would stop and ask about their families. And I thought, this is what a leader is. It's somebody who shows that he cares and how he cares. He died last year, just about a year ago in May, and I still miss him.
Yeah.
We stayed in touch. He died of Alzheimer's. He was the most brilliant man I ever met, and for somebody like him to lose that mind was one of the saddest things I ever watched. But I learned a lot from Kevin Carroll, and I'll always miss him, but I'll always appreciate what he taught me.
That's amazing. That's awesome.
And finally, Tom Brokaw.
Tom Brokaw.
I think he would be fascinating to sit down with when we look at what he's covered in his lifetime.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, some of the books he's written, I've read most of his books. I read the one, obviously, The Greatest Generation. I read the one on Vietnam. I've read a couple of others. But his coverage of the 9/11, and I would love to know some of the backstories.
Yeah.
And I think to be able to sit down and talk with him about his experiences and pick his mind about the generation that he and I have lived in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would just be fascinating.
Oh, man. I was off by 1 year. I was very fortunate, privileged to go to St. Lawrence for college. And the year before I graduated, he was the commencement speaker. Should have graduated early, Ryan. You slacker.
Yeah.
But anyhow, yeah, I agree with you. Tom Brokaw would be pretty darn cool. Him, and for me, different generation, but for some reason I see Tom Hanks as that way too. Yeah. I feel like there's something about Tom Hanks just being all that he's experienced, and he's been very philanthropic in his life. But Tom Brokaw, that'd be a good one. Yeah. Janet, this has been a phenomenal conversation. I learned a lot, and we had some laughs.
Yeah.
We talked about a lot of good things. Is there any sending message you'd like to give to the Gumption listeners today?
I think we've covered most of it, Ryan. I think that, I don't want to get into a lot of details about something else at this point. We've probably run way over our time limit. But I guess that, I had 2 retirement receptions, one here in Plattsburgh and one in Malone. And I did them as thank you receptions. Used up every last penny of my campaign funds and actually raised $5,500 for Honor Flight. Said, who needs 300 bottles of wine?
Right.
Please give money to Honor Flight. And I was absolutely delighted with that, the amount of money we raised. But I did them as thank you receptions because obviously a lot of the people, government officials and supporters and all those folks who were invited, and had good turnouts at both of them. I wanted to be able to tell them thank you. But I feel that same way about saying it openly to whoever is listening to this podcast. I truly am so thankful for the opportunities that I had to give whatever I could give and do whatever I could do for this great area that we call the North Country. I'm convinced there's no better place to live. People ask me, "You're going to move to Flint?" No, I'm never going to go. I'm never going to go anywhere but here. And whether I go into the grocery store or into a restaurant or walking down the street or whatever, usually there's somebody who wants to stop and chat. And I think how lucky I am that at this time, I'm my 3rd year out and people still care enough to say hello and want to talk to me. And I'm very blessed. And so thank you to the North Country.
I would say that's a perfect send-off. Well, thank you again, Janet. This has been a phenomenal conversation, and I feel privileged to be able to sit down with you for an hour today and learn a little bit more about your story of gumption. Quick thank you to our sponsors. Don't forget, check out Open Gate Farmstead. They are a stone's throw away from the Sable River. Check them out on YouTube or their social media. Kavanaugh Realty, #Local Matters. Joey and Galen Trombley doing great things for our economy, by helping our neighbors buy and sell their homes. And then this episode's featured sponsor, Spark-A-Clean. Give them a call, 518-578-2931. They provide professional and economic cleaning solutions to residential and commercial structures. They specialize in window cleaning, floor care, carpet extraction, and auto boat detailing. They're on Facebook, Instagram. Check them out. Spark-A-Clean, SPARKIKLEEN. That's Zach and Kate Hoyt. Great people. I really like them a lot. And thanks for tuning in. Janet, thank you again one more time. And
my pleasure. Thank you, Ryan.
Everybody, until next time, enjoy.